This session will be different from the others because it's not just one just one document, but rather a number of them. The end, even though Tamara said written by women, I find that I can't guarantee that they were written by women. They were sent by women. We can have letters sent by women, letters sent by men, and people often use scribes. Men who were completely literate used scribes as well, so that it was not a reflection of their literacy. But this is definitely, we're talking about documents that deal with women. The first one here, I'd like to show you. I would like to show you at least a photocopy of a document from the Cairo Genizah. This is a letter to Maimonides from his sister Miriam. The notation there, TS, is Taylor Schechter, the famous Schechter and Taylor from Cambridge. And you can see the writing is not so easy to read, but these are Hebrew letters, and when you read them, they actually sound completely like Arabic, except for a Hebrew word that shows up here or there. At any rate, this is the text here of the translation of the letter that Miriam writes to her brother Maimonides. And note how she turns to him. She turns to him as anybody else would, not necessarily be, dear brother, how you doing? But she's very formal to the esteemed sage, our sage Moses. May God preserve him from your sister, Miriam, your sister, who continuously praises you. And this isn't enough for her. She has to add another line. May God make permanent the honor of my Lord and Master, the crown of my head, and my light, and my splendor. And when I have the three dots, I go back and show you, look again at the document. I'm not managing to go back. This is not, yes. You can see that there are torn spots, there are holes there. This one is not in terribly bad condition, although towards the end we will see that then there are blank spaces there. It's because we cannot possibly read what is there. The clicker, it doesn't like me this evening. It's not moving with me. And Megalgavi. Okay, doke. We have a different one. Hopefully it will be more user-friendly. So we see that she continues, and she continues giving all these classic, lovely ways of turning to someone when you really want to get a good response from them, and enhance his splendor and enlarge his happiness and adorn his honor and majesty by your obedience to him, and will never cease being exalted, and his reputation will never cease to be lofty, and his happiness will not cease to be at the maximum. And again, the three dots means it's something we can't read because it's just not there, something sublime. And then she finally, she feels that she's given him enough honor, and as her opening, we see almost 5 lines. And then she gets down to the hardcore why she's writing this letter to her brother. If you were to see me, you would not recognize me because of the awful state I am in, and the intensity of, and again, something's missing there, and the reason for this is the son of mine, about whom any news has vanished. So here we have a classic mother worrying about her son. She's writing to the uncle, because, like when our kids go off to summer camp and don't write letters, well, here we've got no news from her son. He has become, and it's a lovely metaphor, he has become like someone in a well. Then you either, and sometimes you can hear resonance, and sometimes you hear absolutely nothing. No letter whatsoever has reached me from him, nor what, and she goes on, but again, it's cut off. But she's letting us know that this boy is not at home. She's apparently not in Fustat, in Old Cairo, with Maimonides. And she's writing to him. It's possible that he is in Fustat. I think that the assumption or the guess was that she had sent him to Fustat for his studies. At any rate, she has not heard from him, and she's eating her heart out. And she says, and I do not know his whereabouts, and as a result, I am continuously crying and fasting. I will point out that this is a very classic way that in this society that women as well as men would emphasize their state of desperation, of worry, of not feeling that they just can't deal with the situation anymore, that they're crying and fasting, fasting and crying. Sometimes they will even go on and say, and I haven't bathed, and I'm not going to bathe until I hear from my brother or my son or whatever. And she goes on, he left me, forgot me, and ignored me, for better or for worse. So here again, she's really going on and letting her brother know that she's at her wit's end. Her son has disappeared. She doesn't know, she's assuming he is where he's supposed to be, but he's not answering her letters. And she's, as I said, eating her heart out. He's ignoring her completely. And nothing has succeeded in distracting me from them. In other words, she's just completely obsessed with the fact that he is gone and isn't writing to her. And then again, there's something missing here. And then, for he is the community's leader. So she probably what's written there is something like, I'm turning to my master because he is the community's leader. In other words, if you're the head of the community and if you have contacts, then you're the person who's going to be able to help me because you're the leader. You know everybody, or you have people who work for you. And if I were in a good state, then I would be presumably able to deal with this. And I didn't consider turning to you. And she really tries not to bother her brother. She really makes an effort out of knowing that he's incredibly busy as the head of the community, as the Sultan's doctor, and so on and so forth. And she doesn't want to hound her brother. But she's saying, I didn't consider turning to you except in this matter. You can be a help to me since your reputation is respected and your merit the greatest of all probably of all the rabbis, of all the scholars, of all the leaders, whatever. But she's saying, look, you're the person who can help me out. There's nobody else. And then she says something regarding education, which is probably why we think that it has to do that he's in some educational facility, possibly some Beit Midrash, some school. And then she gives him instructions. Inform me about his situation. In other words, send out, she doesn't expect Maimonides to actually pick up the phone and start making calls. But he's got lots of people who are helping him, who are working with him, and send out feelers, send out, people to ask at the different schools, etc. Inform me about his situation and where he is located, because at this point, she's not even sure that he's where he's supposed to be. He might have left school, he might have gone to another school, and she says, and if he is in a place that is graced by your presence, so if he's somewhere in Fustat, he's somewhere in Cairo, inform me, please. If there's somewhere that you have, you have connections there, and if he is roaming about in another place, and she's, leaving that as an option as well. If so, send him my letter. In other words, here, if this is my letter, forward my letter to him, and then she says, and a letter from you. So she's giving him instructions that maybe my letter isn't enough because I've been writing to him and he hasn't been responding to me, but you write to him with admonishment. You tell him off. You tell him he's been a terrible son. You tell him that he's not being responsible. Tell him that that his mother is eating her heart out. And then in her hopes of this, and perhaps he will correspond with me and will tell me his real news. And, you know, here is what she's hoping to do by her plan. And then in the margin, and again, if you noticed in the document that I showed, most of the writing was in the center, but paper was expensive and people didn't want to use another piece of paper, so they would write on the margins, they would write on the top, they would write on the side, they would write upside down, you name it. So in the margin she writes, and kindly send me a letter from you yourself. In other words, you should be the person, you know, who should let me know what's going on. Don't have one of your assistants write to me. You know, I want to hear from my brother. This is not beyond your powers to find someone who can deliver it to me. Inform me about all his affairs. In this way, you will ease my heart and silence my weeping and relieve my burning thirst and suffering. Again, she goes back to the fact that she's crying and fasting. You will do this out of mercy and kindness from you. And the heartiest of greetings to my Lord and Master. And these letters always at the end have regards. And he is in a place that is graced by your presence. I went the wrong directions because this is a different kind of roller. Okay, and your servants send heartfelt regards to you. So she's already saying, you know, other people are sending regards. Give regards to Jamila. I'm not sure who Jamila is because we don't know if he is married at this point, if this his wife's name. His wife is not mentioned in any document, so we have no idea what his wife's name is. And extend my greeting to your brother David. So this is still when his brother David, who was a merchant, was alive and supporting him, and your sisters. Now, your sisters are her sisters too. It really should be our sisters. And I guess it means that not only David, but their sisters are also living in Fustat. May God preserve them. And she's sending their best regards. And then here, the writer of this letter. So we know that this is not her handwriting, but rather she had a scribe doing it. It's not clear what his name is. He's not written. The son of Jacob the cantor. He sends greetings to all of you. And the document has, again, on the other side, the address to the esteemed one, the foundation, the honored, our long and long-standing pillar. Could you ever see this on an address instead of, you know, a Santa Claus or to the head of the yeshiva? And it goes on. I mean, this is the most unusual address you will find. And long-standing pillar, our master and sage, Moses, the leader, et cetera, the wonderful, the superb crown, son of our honored sage Maimon, because his Moses ben Maimon. May the memory of the righteous be for a blessing. May his splendor be glorified and his honor increase. And thus ends her letter, of which here we have a mother basically begging for information about her son because she really is desperate, but she certainly has the right person who is able to help her. Okay, next document is a responsa, which Professor Joshua Blau, whom I've mentioned, he published it. But the wonderful part about this one is that there were other documents that were found afterwards because there were drafts of this responsa, which is sort of, you know, this question that was posed, was prepared in different editions. So let's read the one we have, and then I'll tell you what's behind the scenes. What will you say? And then I did not translate these because there was such a long string of honorary names of flattery, it would have taken up another half an hour for us to go through them. So you can imagine that here they're really trying to make Maimonides feel that he is super honored. Our teacher and our rabbi, our Lord and our Gaon, the great Moshe. I still left enough in. The strong, and the word there was sort of hammer, patish, but I chose the gavel because it's sort of the gavel of halacha. May his name live forever, whose authority is the authority of the truth and the justice. And then something is illegible. And who raises the flag of the religion of Moses, the commentator of the Talmud. And so we see it's a very, very long list of turning to Maimonides to make him feel that he is the only person who can deal with this. And here we get the gist of it. about the matter of a teacher of small girls. So here we have, it's a male teacher of small girls, just the opposite of what we've seen before. We had a female teacher of small boys, a teacher of small girls who had a disagreement with one man. We don't know with whom, with one man. And the teacher, the teacher, swore an oath that he would not teach the daughters of so-and-so when he was agitated verbally. So somehow he got into a tizzy, and he just suddenly said, no, that's it. I'm not going to teach these girls anymore. Later, he regretted his statement. And also, these girls did not remove their headscarves in front of others, and there's no one to replace him in his teaching. So what they're tossing in also is that here we've got a teacher of these girls. It was his job. It was how he supported himself. And at some point, he swears that he's not going to teach them anymore, and then he feels bad about it. But they're throwing in some other descriptions of the situation, that the girls apparently covered their, at least, they didn't cover their whole face. It wasn't a burqa, but they had head coverings for the sense of modesty. And it says that they didn't remove their headscarves in front of other people, and there's no one to replace him in his teaching. So whenever he quit teaching because of his oath, some time has passed and no substitute has been found. And he lost this benefit that he had from them and from their fathers. In other words, he lost his salary. He obviously didn't have another job, and he lost the benefit, and he basically realized that he made a mistake, that he never should have quit teaching. And there is no use in having women teach, since women teach erroneously. So they're throwing in here saying that, oh yes, and in the Talmud, it says that women shouldn't teach since they teach. So we can't get a woman teacher. He has to be the teacher. And then comes an interesting part, and the teacher himself is blind. Okay, so this is a blind teacher who is teaching these girls. And if you go back, you can see that it says, and the girls did not remove their headscarves in front of others. They removed their headscarves in front of him because he is blind. And I can imagine what went on in that classroom with the blind teacher, what they did, and how they misbehaved and what he didn't see, what was going on. But at any rate, the teacher is blind. No one is taking his place. Again, they say it again. And he is losing out because he had aid and benefit from it. In other words, that he had a job. Tell us, our Lord and Gaon. So here's the question. Is it permissible for him to teach them? And his compensation from the heavens will double. And then they add, and he explains the prayers to them in Arabic. So he's explaining, one of the things he does is teaching them to pray. And if they're reading the prayers in Hebrew, he is giving them translations into Arabic so they can understand the prayers that they're doing. And then there's a very interesting, it ends with just with a line from Psalm 84, the 84:7, which is Gam barachot ya'ateh moreh. And here it's sort of a double entendre because it literally means as if the early rain covered it with blessings. That's the translation, the English translation of it. But it's also, we've got Ya'ateh moreh, and with blessings they enwrap their teacher because the moreh is the teacher here. So it was sort of a clever little uses as well. So what does Maimonides answer? If he regrets this, he should bring his remorse before 3 Jewish men, and they will release him from his oath. This is really a very, very simple question, and it's sort of surprising that they even bothered Maimonides with this, because it's sort of like everybody knows that. If you swear, you make an oath, then all you have to do is have 3 men. It's like it's sort of a temporary beit din, that they're serving like they are a court, and say, I'm sorry, I really regret doing this, and you can be released from the oath. And so we have here him saying, 1, 2, 3. This is sort of, I would call, a no-brainer. And he adds, and afterwards he can teach them as was his custom. In other words, the question that he asked before is, can he continue teaching them? No problem, you can teach the girls. It's really okay teaching the girls. And there is no sin upon him. Don't feel bad about it. Thus wrote Moshe. Okay, so this is what we had. And then later on, in the vast expanse of all the documents from the Cairo Genizah, they found various drafts of this letter. It turns out that the teacher had gone, I guess, to an inn. And while he was there, he got drunk. And while he was drunk, he apparently said, that's it, I've had it with teaching those girls. I don't want to teach them anymore. Nishba, I swear I'm not going to teach them anymore. And in one draft of the letter, he confesses this. He basically says, that he was drunk and he did it, and this is what he did. And then I guess they realized that this is not the wisest way to turn to the Rambam and to Maimonides and to tell him that, you've been drinking, and how about taking this out of the letter? So it was found that there was there were later editions of it that were sent and copied over, and Maimonides got to see, I would say a much, much cleaner version of what happened, which is really shows us what also the mentality of what's of the society, and what you should tell and what you shouldn't tell, and how you can try to get the answer that you want to get. Although again, this one was not a difficult halakha question at all, but it certainly gives us some insight into the society that here we have an interesting case of girls who are learning, and girls who are being taught. They're being taught to read. They're being taught to read, probably to read Hebrew, and then being explained the prayers in Arabic, which was fine. It was done in many of the synagogues. There were those who were reading the Bible, reading the Torah, and then having the Targum in Aramaic, and all as well, often of Rav Saadia Gaon, of the Arabic translation as well. So this was totally acceptable. Okay, the next document I called Maimonides and the Sinner, because we have here the claims of the sinner, and the sinner it's listed there as posha'at. So we already understand that this is feminine. This is a woman who is being called by Maimonides, being called a sinner. Now notice, in the last document, he let the blind teacher know there's no sin involved here. Don't worry about it. In this one, he is not being anywhere as kind, because we are talking about a Jewish woman who converted to Islam, and she is clearly a sinner in his eyes. And here we have them asking, and it's a very, very short question. Very often these questions might be sent in a personal letter, which the scribes might just copy the gist of it and not go into details. And here it says, will you be so kind, your honor, my friend and patron, the elder, the honorable, the pious, to send for the faithful elder, the member of the academy, may God protect him, and to inform him. So here is really very short, and it seems like it's a colleague of Maimonides who's writing to him, to send for the member of the academy, may God protect him, and to inform him that it is forbidden to him in any manner to testify in front of the Qadi of the Muslims about the ketubah of this sinner. So what we're talking about here is that a Jewish woman converts to Islam, but she still has her marriage contract, her ketubah. And in it, she probably brought in a dowry. She probably brought something into the marriage. And she wants to claim her dowry. She wants to claim her ketubah. So she turned to the Qadi. The Qadi is the judge, the Muslim judge. And she turned to the Muslim judge and she asked him for help. Now, she's now Muslim, so he is going to try and help her. It's not a Jew turning to him, it's a Muslim turning to him. And she is asking for help to collect whatever she brought into the marriage. The Qadi turned to the Jewish community leaders here, the elder, the member of the academy, and said, I want you to testify about her marriage contract. He couldn't read the Aramaic in it, so he's bringing in, he says, I want you to testify in the marriage contract here. And here, and to say what she's demanding is reasonable. She's making an oral demand, and I want to know that it's written there. Now, if they refuse, Maimonides could get into trouble with the authorities. This was a very delicate matter. So Maimonides comes up with a way to get around the whole situation. He says, but his contention should be that he will say, this is a bill of bride payment, which we do not know who are the witnesses for it. So he's saying to them, take the fifth. If the Qadi asks you to look at the contract and to verify that she is entitled to what she's demanding and that she should get it, he doesn't want them to be involved. He's trying to find a way to evade her claim about the bride payment. What he's giving them is a way to get out of it. He's saying, just go to the Qadi and say, we don't know who the witnesses are. And if we don't know who the witnesses are, then we can't testify. And then he says, he's very clear about this, and I do not in any way approve budging from this directive. In other words, don't do anything. Do exactly what I say. Go in and just say, we don't know who the witnesses are, therefore we cannot testify about this. And also the witnesses are forbidden to testify about it. So if they do, somebody actually knows who the witnesses were, they have to stay out of the picture. May their well-being increase and grow. So we see here that it's sort of a tricky situation that Maimonides looks for a way to get out of it. Okay, here we have a widow who is seeking to remarry. And we able to figure out, and this one is from 1171. When Sit al-Hassan, the daughter of the elder Moshe, may his soul rest in paradise, widow of the Sheikh Abu al-Qair, and this is, again, was cut off. Okay, so we have here a widow who asked to marry. She wants to remarry. We have a widow who wants to remarry. To marry Sheikh is just like the elder. Abu Ali the Kohen, son of Sheikh Abu al-Hassan, the elder Kohen, may he rest in paradise. We asked her, the court, asked her about what Abu Chaya the Kohen, her husband, left behind. And she said, he did not leave me anything. And we said to her, swear to this. So it's interesting, we have again another oath involved here. And she said, yes, I swear by an oath that binds me according to Jewish law. That she has nothing that she wants, because otherwise it gets a little complicated on what she can have and what she has to give up or use or has used while she was a widow. So I swear by an oath that binds me. And this was from her older son. So she actually has two sons, her older son, Abu Netzer, and we exempted her son, Abu Netzer. Oh, my son, do you know if your father left anything with your mother? And he said, I don't know if my father left any of the clothes, furnishings, etc., etc. I don't know. But not merchandise, and not dirhams, and not dinars, and not household utensils. And we repeated the question to the youth, and we said to him, take care. If you knew anything, or anything was said to you along these lines, know that if your mother swears before us about what your father bequeathed in taking anything, only then can she wed and enter on her own into a marriage. So in other words, they wanted the son to be the witness to what she was swearing, that nothing was left for her, and therefore she can leave clean and free without having to negotiate about anything or deal with anything. And he says, whatever debt remains for you from her will not be claimable. No, if you think she's got something that is yours, you cannot claim this. And the aforementioned lad said, I know the situation of our mother and what she lacks and her poverty, and that my father did not leave her anything. So in other words, he's saying, you must be kidding me. You think that she's running away with all these things. My mother's in a terrible situation, which is probably why she wanted to get married again, so she could have someone who could take care of her. And I absolve her of the oath that I and my brother are required to take according to the law. And I take full responsibility for my little brother. So we have him there saying, you know, my mother has nothing, let her out, she can marry again. And we, the undersigned, from Abu Netzer, the aforementioned fellow, we bought a full acquisition. These are all the legal terms complete in the wording that as of now, he has already exempted his mother. The aforementioned Sit al-Hassan, from now on, she is exempted from the obligatory oath upon her according to the law, a complete and total exemption. And when nobody can come afterwards to say, we know you've got lots of things that your husband left for you. Final, real. And that the son, takes full responsibility for his younger brother, and he has, by him and in his authority, for his younger brother, all that is incumbent upon him. And if his younger brother will sue him when he reaches maturity, there we can bring up the option that maybe the brother's going to say, wait a minute, I don't know anything about this. And that it's going to be his problem. He'll have to deal with it for overturning the aforementioned oath. He will not be exempt from what his younger brother sues him for, but rather for the exemption of his mother. So whatever he exempts his mother from, that is final. But if his younger brother comes up with some idea about him maybe having lost out on some property or some funds, then he's going to have to deal with it himself. And what was before us, we wrote and we signed, so it would be a title of rights, and it is all valid, and all this occurred in the month of Tishrei 1171, in its first 10th, under the authority of our Lord Moshe, the great rabbi. May his name last forever and be written as a merit. So we see here that it's basically Maimonides is adding his name at the end, saying everything that has happened at the court is totally kosher, it's perfectly okay, and this woman now has the right to remarry because she has not taken anything, and she's sworn that to this, and her son has supported her. Okay, the next responsa is a little complicated, and this is a classic responsa also in Professor Blau's collection. And I call it Who Marries Whom, because we're trying to figure out what's happening here. And I'll try to lead you through it. Instruct us in the manner of a mature orphan maiden. Okay, so we've got a young woman who's, at least she's over 12 and a half, because that's what the maturity is in Jewish law. But she's also an orphan. Okay, so we don't have her father. We will see her mother is still alive, but we know that both in Islam and in Judaism, yatom, an orphan or yatoma, is someone who doesn't have one parent, whereas in English we usually have an orphan as someone who doesn't have either parent. So to instruct us in the matter of a mature orphan maiden. Now also notice, this one does not start with all this, 15 lines of our great, wonderful, fabulous leader, brilliant, et cetera, et cetera. They jump right into the problem because it's complicated and they just want to deal with that. So this maiden was engaged to Reuben in the presence of the Jewish court and a large audience. In other words, she was about to get married. After 2 months passed, Shimon, who was a relative of hers, appeared, and he brought a document in his hand that her father had promised her to him for betrothal 4 years earlier. And she was then a minor, and the document was validated in court. So this Shimon pops up and says, guess what? When she was, 8.5, maybe a little older than that, when the father was alive, because we understand that her father passed away in the interim, he had written down that this is a shidduch, that you are going to marry your relative, we don't know, cousin, whatever, there. Okay. And neither the maiden nor her mother, nor any of her relatives had any knowledge of this matter. So the mother, I mean, it's amazing. The father went and made this agreement with Shimon, and he didn't even tell his wife. And didn't tell the daughter. Let's assume she was 8 years old, 9 years old, so he didn't feel he needed to tell her. He was waiting until she matured. But not even his wife. The maiden and he who was pleading for her in the court, so she had a representative who she, more or less like a lawyer, she had a representative who came to the court. They denied the validity of Shimon's document. Now, what is he popping up with this? I'm engaged to Shimon. I'm about to marry him, and this guy pops up with another document. How can I be engaged to two men? And Shimon knew about the matter of the engagement with Reuben and was present. So this is very interesting. In other words, Shimon, not only did he know, but he was there when it was being publicized. Shimon went to the maiden to take her as his wife. In other words, he ignored the fact that she was engaged to Reuben. And again, these names are not their actual names. I'm calling them by that because that's what they're using, but they're anonymous. And Shimon goes and he says, okay, come on, let's go get married. Yalla. The maiden abstained when she probably went ballistic, as they say. I mean, what is this? I'm about to marry Reuben. I don't know who you are. I mean, some relative that I have had no contact with. And she said to him, I have no desire for the Shimon in any way whatsoever, because he had hurt the maiden's feelings with his words, and she was angry with him, and understandably so. And two witnesses came to talk heart to the maiden about the matter with Shimon, since he was a relative. So I don't know if there were two witnesses who had signed the agreement with her father, but they came and said, look, he's your relative, come on, marry him. And she said to them, testify on my behalf and confirm it with a solemn ceremony that I have no desire for him, and I will not see him, and I will not look at him. And I also invoke your testimony about me, that I have already appointed a messenger, my maternal uncle, as a representative to receive a complete divorce writ and to present it to me. In other words, she knows that because he has this document saying that she is wed to him, even though they hadn't completed the wedding, she still needed a get, she still needed a divorce writ. So she said, look, she turned to her mother's brother, and he said, okay, I'll go and demand a divorce so that you can get out of this conundrum, because this has become extremely messy, to say the least. And they wrote two documents and validated them in court. So they went there and said to the court that here, let's have let's give her a divorce document. And the court could not make a judgment between them, since Shimon held the document that was in his hand. I mean, he was refusing to acknowledge, to give her the divorce. The maiden's mother went to the Muslim judge. So see here, the maiden's mother is Jewish, but she felt that the court was not managing to control the situation, that this man is being totally stubborn, refusing to divorce her daughter. She went to the Qadi, to the Muslim judge, to ask him to pressure the court to declare a judgment. So here, again, it's very interesting. You see the contact between the judge in the Jewish court and the Muslim court, and I need a judgment. I can't be left hanging like this. And the Muslim judge sent for the members of the court and 10 of the community's respectable men and ordered them to decide between the two of them by his mandate. In other words, you can't leave her in limbo. You have 10 respectable men, you have the court here, you've got enough intelligent members of the community who can deal with this. This poor girl wants to marry Reuven, and Shimon he's really just blocking completely. The courier presented what he had in his hand. Then Shimon claimed that he was engaged to the maiden and brought a validated document related to this. The court and the audience and those present said to him, "Write a writ of divorce for the maiden by means of which she will be free." Notice how in the last one we had a woman who was a widow wanting to remarry and wanted her freedom so that she could remarry. Here we have a young girl who isn't yet even married, who's caught in between all these documents that said she's engaged to this one, engaged to that one. The court is being pushed by the Qadi to deal with it. And the court said, and everyone there, I mean, they were tremendous social pressure here from the community. Write a writ of divorce. Give her the getter ready, by means of which she will be free. And they confirmed this with a solemn ceremony that was appropriate in the situation and testified about it. And the court ordered him to write it and ordered the witnesses to testify. And he wrote a complete divorce writ, and Shimon presented it to the courier. So we have finally, he breaks down, he gives the court, the courier to bring it to the court. He brings them the divorce writ. But the plot thickens. After a while, Shimon claimed that he was coerced. He said, "Wait a minute, they forced me to do this. I did not do this on my own volition. You know, I relent." And so they're asking now Maimonides, can the divorce writ be nullified? Or will it be a complete divorce bill? In other words, complete and final. It can't be. There's no going back. And is she permitted to all men? Now, the way wording here does not mean is that she's going to be, into prostitute. It simply means, is she now allowed to marry anybody? Is she out of this net that he is trying to catch her in and to keep her there? Instruct us, our Lord, what is the law? And your compensation will double. And his reply, she is permissible to any man. In other words, she can now marry anyone else. Since a divorce bill was written under, now he's saying it was under the pressure of a Jewish court, and the force of a court is not called coercion. In other words, it was not someone who was literally, bending his arm behind his back and saying, "You've got to do this," or threatening him. The court was saying, here we've got all the documents, and the right thing to do, halakhically, is to give her the divorce. So he's saying he can say he was coerced. This, if the court does it, it's not coercion. It's pressure, yes, indeed. But the man who objects to the court order, which obligates him by law, it is he who forced himself in his evil intention, as we explained in the large composition on this matter. So what we understand is that elsewhere, Maimonides wrote some really long explanation of what was really going on halakhically, but the bottom line here that he's saying is that he was evil. Look what he's trying to do. There's a young girl who had a groom. They're about to be married, and he shows up with this document that, where was he for the last 4 or 5 years? What is it? He's popping up with this, and now trying to pull a stunt. And the court has dealt with it. Granted, the court needed to be pushed. The court was not so fast about doing it. The Muslim judge had to give them a little push there, but in the end, they managed to get him to do exactly what he was supposed to do, which was to give the girl a divorce writ and allow her to be free. So we've seen just 5, I bought 5 out of many, many documents. I have a wonderful document of a Cohen who marries a divorcee, and Maimonides goes absolutely crazy when he finds out about it and deals with them, both of the couple extremely strongly, negatively. There are incidents of Maimonides getting involved in the fact that the women in Egypt are not going to the mikveh. There are lots of letters written or sent by women to their husbands who are out of town, to their brothers, to their sisters, et cetera, et cetera. So what I've managed to, or tried to do, is to give you a little taste of the kind of treasures that we have in the Cairo Genizah that relate to Maimonides. Not everything relates to Maimonides, but I wanted to just center around this great scholar. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a few questions, so we have a few minutes also for your answers. Where was a Rambam's sister living? Is it surprising that a sister corresponds like anyone else rather than as a beloved sibling? Or does this letter imply that the Rambam's family was a bit unusual?
We assume that she was not living in Cairo, because if she was living in Cairo and she had sent her son to school in Cairo, then she could go knock at the door and find out if he was truant or not. So the assumption is, and the fact that she's sending regards to her sisters and to all these people tells us basically that she probably maybe was married someone from out of, someone who lived elsewhere, so that it's not like that. His brother did not write him letters like this, and we don't have any other letters from any of the sisters who were living in town. But she was living out of town. Her son was in town with him, and that's why she's having him deal with that.
Okay. Amalia wants to know, do we know why he wanted to marry someone who did not want to marry him? What was in it for him? This refers, I think, to the end here.
Well, your guess is as good as mine. Maybe she was really pretty. Maybe she had a really nice dowry from her father. Maybe he thought that because she was a relative, he would have, an in with the family. We really, these are the problems, is that the responsa are only one-sided. And he didn't go into an explanation because he doesn't ask the question. It's the court is turning to Maimonides saying, look, we got into this terrible fix, and how do we deal with it now? Is this correct, what we did, that we finally got the court to force him to give her the divorce writ? But this is one that you can leave open to speculation as to why he wanted, and was he just being a nasty man? Maybe. She obviously wasn't thrilled with him, because I think that if her mother had said, hey, you know what, he's got 3 beautiful houses, and and he can treat you really, really well, and you know what, let's get rid of Reuven, take Shimon. I mean, after all, he was Dad's cousin, and so on and so forth. I mean, there could have been something like that in the background. Nobody's trying to talk her into marrying him. So I think the assumption is, at this point, is that there's something a little tricky going on here, and why but he was stubborn. Maybe he was older and wanted a young girl. We don't know. It's all to you. We leave it to your imagination.
So Alan wants to know, is there any evidence that Maimonides retracted or changed any decision he made?
I am not qualified to give an absolute response to that. This is something that that Blau, who went through all his documents, would see, that Mordechai Kiva Friedman would say, I suspect not, but I think that anyone who heard the first 2 talks that I gave saw that Maimonides gave a different answer, but he was asked a different question. In other words, in the first one, he is telling the husband, you can prevent your wife from teaching. In the second one, he's telling the husband, you may teach. But the questions he were asked were different. So he's not reneging on his own answer. He does change his mind about various number of things. Remember, he was not born in Egypt. He's Spanish. And he comes over, and, he's in his 30s, and he's getting used to life there. He is very, very anxious, extremely anxious, to set things straight, to organize all the different rules. And he sees that there's no setup there. Even the heads of the communities aren't bothering these kinds of things. And this is why he's giving so many answers to in the responsa and going out and finding out what's going on in the different communities and trying to organize everything according to the way he saw it. And this is really what he saw his mission. He saw his mission is to organize everything the way he saw it. Now, I give an example. One really good example is that when he first came, he was pretty adamantly negative towards the Karaites. He had no experience with them, and he really saw them as, stay away from them, they're dangerous. And as he got to know them and see how they worked, and how their synagogue was in the same neighborhood, and there were also Karaite leaders who the Sultan was very happy having around. There were wealthy merchants there, and he saw that he changed his tune. And he was asked, "What do you do now if a Karaite and a Rabbinite want to marry?" Whereas beforehand, he would have probably said, "No way, stay away from them." He then discussed how you do a ketubah, and we have ketubot between Rabbinites and Karaites, and it's perfectly okay. So we see that, I wouldn't say, he changed a ruling, but he grows and he adapts and he changes with it. But he also goes out sometimes very strongly against things that he didn't like, such as I mentioned, the mikveh, that the women were going to the bathhouse. And they were not counting 7 days, 7 clean days. And then there's a whole discussion as, is this biblical? Is this rabbinic? What do you have to do? What you don't have to do? And he got to the point where he was basically saying that if the women didn't do this, then they were going to lose their dowry. He went right to the weak spot. Eve Krakowski has a wonderful article about this, where she talks about how Maimonides is really out to make his mark, and he sort of, he really gets into a huge battle with the women or with society there.
I think we'll take one last question. Could the Islamic court overrule the Beit Din if they felt compelled to do so?
The Islamic court would not stick its nose into the Beit Din. The Jewish court had complete autonomy. But if a Jew went to the Qadi, went to the court, and presented something that the Qadi felt was unacceptable, that was illegal, that was against Muslim law, that was against the state law, then dina de machuta dina. Then the law of the land is what is final. And I mean, this is what the Jewish court is always trying to prevent. They do not want the interference, but we already see that the mother went to the Jewish Qadi because things weren't moving. We saw that the convert went to the Qadi because she's a Muslim, and it gets very, it gets very delicate there. On the whole, they preferred not to be involved. But also, for example, when that Kohen married the divorcee, they got married. It isn't even clear who married them. If they just had 2 witnesses and a ketubah, this becomes very touchy because they want to go to the Qadi to defend them, and the court doesn't quite know what to do. But Maimonides is saying, sorry, we are excommunicating you if you don't divorce her right now. You can't come back into our community. So it's very delicate, but they try to stay out of it, but they can't always, and sometimes they're brought in, as we see.